Hello, everyone. Welcome to Noteworthy Nonfiction Reads. I'm so glad to have all of you smarty nonfiction readers with us tonight. Welcome. So before we get started, I'd like to orient you to a few features of our Zoom environment. So tonight's program is in a webinar format, so your camera and microphone are not active. So that means though you can see and hear us, we can't see and hear you, and no one else can see or hear you. So you can just, kick back and relax and hear about some great books. But if you do have questions for us, we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you could hold your questions until then. Towards the end of the presentation, we will enable the chat function. I'll let you know, I'll type in the chat box when I've enabled that so that you know that it's open and available for you. It will look like a little speech bubble with the word chat underneath, and you'll just click on that icon and open up the box and type in your question and click enter. You may need to wiggle your cursor, your mouse, or lightly tap on your screen to get that icon bar to appear. We also have enabled live closed captions. So if you would like to show the captions, if you're not seeing them, hide them if you are, or change the font size, you can do that using the live transcript CC menu in that little icon bar. So tonight's presenters are myself. Hi, I'm Sarah. I work in Adult Services Readers Advisory at headquarters. I'm also joined by Bernice from Indian Trails, Lauren from Daniel Boom, and Harry also from Adult Services. And we're going to be talking about a lot of really great nonfiction titles tonight. You can get them either in print or e-media. They're available in various formats. So here's the link to our catalog. And remember, we also have Hoopla and Overdrive, which is available through the Libby app. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So I'm starting with Underland, A Deep Time Journey by Robert McFarlane. And I discovered McFarlane through his lovely nature-themed picture book, The Lost Words. It's one of those beautiful, profound picture books that both children and adults really can enjoy and can enjoy together. He writes very lyrically and poetically about humanity's connection and place within nature. And this newest book, Underland, might just be his magnum opus. It's certainly his most sort of serious and epic book to date. He explores the concept of the underworld in myth and literature and science, and he covers everything from burial rites and catacombs to cave art to nuclear waste disposal. And there is a thematic black and white artwork that's sprinkled throughout. He, shows us that underground is both where we hide our secrets and where we preserve what is most valuable to us. He convinces us that exploring our dark places, both in a physical and psychological sense, can help bring to light our truest motivations. If you love lyrical, philosophical nonfiction that takes you on a wide-ranging adventure within and without, then this book is really for you. Okay, next I have Cant Even, How Millennials Became the Burnout Generation by Helen Peterson. I started following Peterson a number of years ago now. She's had this sort of typically atypical career path and ambivalent relationship to success that many millennials have had. And she started out as a professor of history with a focus on celebrity gossip and culture, pop culture. She then became a journalist for BuzzFeed, where she wrote on very similar topics. And then a few years ago, when she wanted to write a book, she went freelance and she moved to Montana in an attempt to find better work-life balance and cost of living. And it was during this time that she really became interested in burnout, especially among millennials. So this book explores the economic and political reasons why this has happened to so many people in the United States, and how no amount of deep breathing and pedicures is really going to get us out of this. It's really going to take drastic structural change to fix the complex pressures that create burnout, especially on a societal level. And I'm technically a young Gen Xer, or a Zennial, or Exial, if you how you want to pronounce it. And much of this book really resonated with me, though. So I think that the deeper Peterson gets into her argument, the more you can see that this isn't really simply a millennial problem, although because of the kind of economic situation that they came of age in, it does affect them significantly. But really, this is a late capitalist post-industrial problem, and one that will really only grow worse as automation and economic inequality increase. So Peterson closes out the book with a call to action for us to really acknowledge these forces and to work to create a more just and happier society. Okay, next, I have a couple of memoirs. So memoirs are really super popular right now, and for good reason, I think. They can give us glimpses into lives that we don't lead and help us really build empathy. And they can also show us others who are like us, and let us know that we're not alone, you know? So I have two memoirs today. The first is White Magic by Alyssa Washuta. She is a member of the Cowlitz tribe, who are indigenous to southwestern Washington state. She grew up, though, in New Jersey and went to Catholic school, and she was always drawn, though, to New Age practices and witchcraft, but didn't really have access to the knowledge or communities that she needed to fully explore her spirituality. As a young adult, she moved to Washington, where she was able to connect with her Native American heritage and community. And in these really intensely emotional and stylistically complex essays, she explores her ambivalent relationship to white pop culture and white New Age and pagan culture as a means of finding her own Native American magical power. She states in the book, quote, "I don't like calling myself a witch. I don't want to be seen as following a fad, and I don't want the white witches I resemble to take my presence in their spaces as permission for theft. Really, I just want a version of the occult that isn't built on plunder. But I suspect that if we could excise the stolen pieces, there would be nothing left," end quote. And as a certified yoga instructor myself, who has spent a lot of time in these New Age and wellness communities that she's referencing, I definitely appreciate her critique of these communities, and I really recognize the feeling of both attraction and discomfort there. Her writing style is very expressive and evocative, and I love the way that the sections were organized around tarot cards. So definitely check this one out if you want to, discover a fresh new voice. Okay, and then my second memoir is Saigon, a misfits memoir of great books, punk rock, and the fight to fit in by Phuc Tran. And you'll see this title is a bit of a play on words. So Tran is both a high school Latin teacher and a well-known tattoo artist, and he had a viral TED Talk a couple of years ago about grammar. But this book is about his coming of age as a punk music loving Vietnamese immigrant in small town Pennsylvania in the 1980s, which is where his family had moved after the fall of Saigon in 1975. So get it, Saigon. That's where the title comes from. It's organized in chapters that are named after his favorite books from classic literature, such as The Plague by Camus, The Scarlet Letter by Hawthorne, and the autobiography of Malcolm X. And it weaves together each book's themes with his own struggles as like a nerdy punk teen, just looking to fit in America, even if it's fitting in with like the outsiders, right? So Tran's memoir offers a really great balance of humor and heartfelt teen angst and incisive exploration of the immigrant experience. Tran is a bit older than me, and so he's like fully grounded in Gen X, but much like with Peterson's Cant Even, in how it like kind of resonated with my millennial influences, Tran's book is filled with references like skateboarding and gremlins and Happy Meals that really reminded me of my own late Gen X childhood. And, a good memoir really balances the specifics of one person's story with universal truths. And I think that many people will recognize in Tran's story the struggle that we all have as teens with like embarrassment about what makes us different, before we finally realize that that exact thing is the door to what makes us like cool, however you want to define that. And also it's what allows us to offer something of value to the world. So a really great memoir. So check this one out. And then next I have Amazing Decisions, the illustrated guide to improving business deals and family meals by Dan Ariely, illustrated by Matt R. Trower. And Ariely is a professor of psychology and behavior economics at Duke University. He actually, before this book, had written several other books about decision-making and honesty. But this is his first book in a graphic novel form. And the comic artist for this book is a colleague at Duke University. They are the resident artist in the Center for Advanced Hindsight, which I think is like the coolest center name ever, the Center for Advanced Hindsight. Anyway, there are a lot of books out there about habits and making good decisions and finding success and happiness. But I think the clever format of this one is what really sets it apart and makes it kind of a quick read too. So in this book, we follow average guy Adam as he goes through life trying to follow the advice, trying to balance out market forces and social forces to get the best out of life. And he does this by following the advice of these two good fairies that follow him around. There's the market fairy and the social fairy who give him advice to follow. And the book demonstrates in a very sort of charming and personal way how two things that we find opposing can work for us if we understand the situations in which to use them. And I found this book really interesting in combination with Peterson's Cant Even, because as Ariely lays out in the research that explains why money as a motivator can sometimes backfire and why following social norms in every situation will always lead to happiness. Because, on the one hand, there are like there's these two opposing forces, but they're both good fairies. We just have to learn which one to listen to in like the right situation. And then my forthcoming pick, so we're each going to talk about a book that is not quite out yet, but you can keep an eye out for. My forthcoming pick is The Woman They Could Not Silence, One Woman, Her Incredible Fight for Freedom, and the Men Who Tried to Make Her Disappear by Kate Moore. And it's coming out on June 22nd, so next month. And this is the newest book by the author of Radium Girls, which I'm sure many of you have read. She is again telling a tale about a woman who experiences trauma and must fight for her own rights and the rights of all women. So in 1860, Elizabeth Packard's husband has her committed to an insane asylum because he's become increasingly threatened by her intelligence and her independence and frustrated with the tensions in their marriage. So once she gets there, Elizabeth finds that she is not the only woman in this Illinois State Hospital that has been forcibly committed, but is actually sane and does not need any kind of medical intervention. So this is the story of her fight against Dr. Andrew McFarland, who ran the hospital, as well as her fight against the state for her own freedom and the rights of other women who have been committed as like a punishment and not as a legitimate medical treatment. And, I found Radium Girls to be profoundly sad, but also inspiring. And I'll admit it brought me to tears like several times. So I expect that Moore's newest book will have a really similar effect, and I'm really looking forward to it. So be sure to get on the list for that one. All right, so next up we have Bernice's pick, so take it away.
Hello everyone, my name is Bernice. I work at Indian Trails Branch and I'm going to go ahead and get started. My first pick is Disintegration, The Splintering of Black America by Eugene Robinson. Say it with me, Black America is not monolithic. We don't all think the same. We don't all share the same values and ideas about the past or the future. I mean, does the grandchild of a slave have the same experience as the grandchild of a Black doctor or lawyer? Do the political views of wealthy Blacks living in Hollywood align perfectly with those of Blacks in poverty and in less affluent areas? This book explores just that. Disintegration details the political and socioeconomic makeup of Black America. Written over 10 years ago, it still rings true today. This title explores ideas such as Black politics, Black elite, Black progress. Author, journalist, and Pulitzer Prize winner Eugene Robinson details that Black America is split into 4 distinct groups that sometimes overlap: the abandoned poor, immigrants and people of mixed race, the mainstream middle class, and the all-powerful Black elite. Robinson offers a sobering yet hopeful look to where Black America has come from, where Black America is presently, and where and what Black America will become. In true storyteller form, Robinson takes us on a journey from the beginning of the Civil Rights era to the present day. He details the many splits and rifts that occurred in the Black community and why. If you are interested in learning more about the makeup of Black America and its many facets, this book is a must-read. On to my number 2 pick. I'm Judging You, the Do Better Manual by Lovey Ajayi, and we're adding Jones because she is now married. New York Times bestselling author Lovey Ajayi reads us our rights in her debut book, I'm Judging You, a Do Better Manual. It is both hilarious and downright judgy. This book is split into 4 parts: life, culture, social media, and fame. In each part, she serves us titles that we can't help but to dig into. Imagine reading a letter from your judgmental but filthy rich aunt. That's who Lovey is for America, and we need it. I'll read an excerpt. One day, I was minding everyone's business, scrolling through my Facebook news feed, when I saw a picture of someone's dead grandma being prepared for burial. I gasped and then immediately got mad. Who does that? Why would you upload a snapshot of your deceased relative? What are you trying to prove? Because I'm pretty sure we didn't need receipts showing that she really died. We believed you. You didn't need any more people. Furthermore, why would you post a picture of her body before its casket sharp? Her wig wasn't even on yet. End quote. With that type of humor and truth, how could you resist this book? Check out I'm Judging You. Also, be sure to check out her new release, Professional Troublemaker, the Fear Fighter Manual, on St. Louis County Library shelves. On to my 3rd pick, The African Lookbook, a visual history of 100 Years of African Women by Catherine E. McKinley. This beautiful book explores the fashion and culture of African women from the 1870s to the 1970s. Many of us are introduced to the continent of Africa via a poverty-stricken lens. Although oppression is woven into the fabric of African history, it is not the summation of African history. Catherine McKinley takes us on a beautiful journey exploring women's fashion through portraits. The African Lookbook is a visual story told in the eyes, poses, fabrics, and fashion of the glorious women of the African continent. McKinley intentionally draws a stark contrast between the othering and over-sexualizing of the Black female body by painting her, and by her, I mean all of us in the Black feminine form, but in particular, the women that are immortalized in these images with dignity and respect. McKinley explores this nuanced othering and draws the contrast between the male gaze and the colonial gaze. African women were often photographed and fetishized because of their nudity, markings on their bodies, and their culture. These images were then exported around via postcards and treated as trophies of conquest. McKinley's collection is a curated collection of photographs taken by various photographers, some well-known, others unknown. It should also be noted that many of the photographs in the McKinley collection were reimagined by the artist Frida Arupabo and remade into collages that are absolutely beautiful. They are showcased throughout the book. Some of McKinley's other works include Indigo and the Book of Sarahs. On to my number 4 pick. Making Our Way Home, The Great Migration and the Black American Dream by Blair Imani, illustrated by Rochelle Baker. This book is absolutely captivating. Imani tells the story of Black migration after the Reconstruction era. 6 million Blacks sought better jobs and the escape of terror at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan. As they migrated to northern cities, they forever changed the DNA of the North. Cities like Chicago, St. Louis, Kansas City, and many more were enriched by the presence of Blacks from the South and their rich culture. I can share in Imani's humor and challenge to the historical narrative of Black America during the period. Part of her introduction reads, "Growing up, I often wonder what had happened during the years between the end of chattel slavery and the start of the Civil Rights Movement. I often joke that Black people disappeared from the face of the earth during World War I and World War II, only to return with music, afros, and righteous indignation in the 1950s, end quote. Imani's historical insight and Baker's amazing artistry bring this era to life, from Reconstruction to hip-hop, from Pierre Landry to Africa Bambaataa. The story of Black America is a part of the story of America. Be sure to check out Imani's other book, Modern Her Story, stories of women and non-binary people rewriting history on St. Louis County Library shelves. On to my fifth, and I have to be honest, my favorite of the picks. We Are Each Other's Harvest, celebrating African American farmers, land, and legacy by Natalie Bazile. Author of the renowned novel Queen Sugar, which was also adapted for TV by O Network, Natalie Bazile weaves a beautiful anthology of narratives, photographs, stories, and poems to tell the story of Black people and the reclamation of the land. The title is drawn from the quote by Gwendolyn Brooks: "We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond." End quote. After centuries of slavery, the Black experience with the earth is often viewed as severed. We have been enslaved working on land that we could not reap a harvest from. We have been sharecroppers working on land that kept us with invisible chains. We have been lynched hanging from some of the very trees that we planted. However, the relationship between the Black body and the earth was not severed. It is alive and well, and this book celebrates just that. As I flip through these pages, a chilling question entered my mind. What comes to mind when I think of the word farmer? What comes to mind when you think of the word farmer? If I'm honest, I did not envision my ancestors. I did not imagine people that looked like me. This book was both challenging and empowering in that regard. Black people are both reclaiming and healing their relationship with the land, and many have been doing it for generations. We Are Each Other's Harvest will enrich your view of farming in the Black community, challenge your view of farming in America, and give you both historical and creative insight on Black experience with the land. It is a must read. And finally, a book to look forward to: The Hill We Climb and Other Poems by Amanda Gorman. Bearing the same name as her stunning poem performed at the 2021 inauguration, The Hill We Climb and Other Poems is sure to wow us. Author Amanda Gorman is this nation's first youth poet laureate. She graced the 2021 inauguration stage with poise, dignity, and a maturity that made all of America proud. In the same way, I am sure this book will enter our hearts and homes with grace and a vision of the future. I'll read a quote from her inauguration poem featured in this book. "But that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, character, and conditions of man." How beautiful is that? Gorman's work will sit alongside those of Maya Angelou, Audre Lorde, and so many other Black women that have shared their heart and vision for the world via poetic and oftentimes prophetic voice. Young girls will be able to look up and see a woman that looks like them in the Hall of Great Poets. The Hill We Climb and Other Poems is set for release September 2021. And next we have Lauren.
I think I'm okay now. Hard to tell.
You're good, Lauren.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm so sorry. All right. So my name is Lauren, and I'm over at Daniel Boone. So my first book is You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey by Amber Ruffin and Lacey Lamar. These two sisters use this book as a platform to talk about casual racism in everyday life. Lacey Lamar lives in Nebraska and frequently has stories to tell her sister of racist things that happened to her. Whether it's the managers who single out Lacey and her Latinx coworker, a racist donut shop, or just non-Black people who ask questions that seem inane to them but racist to everyone else, the sisters share accounts of the horrible things that they and Black people everywhere have to experience. This was an eye-opening read, and I'm very grateful to the authors for sharing the parts of their lives that those who aren't people of color don't often see. So I definitely recommend this. It was both funny and saddening at the same time, but still a really good one. So next up is The Book of Eels by Patrick Svensson. Now, I could pitch this book as an overall unit, but I think it will be more interesting to tell you about the eel question. To boil it down, no one knows where eels come from. Scientists assume that eels spawn and die somewhere in the Sargasso Sea, but they have never found definitive proof of this theory. For hundreds of years, scientists didn't even know how eels reproduce. Even Sigmund Freud studied this and couldn't figure it out. Eventually, they realized that eels have different life cycles and that only one of those stages is capable of reproduction. When scientists placed trackers on hundreds of eels, they were able to trace their path from their home rivers out to the Atlantic and in the direction of the Sargasso Sea. But then the trackers fell off and the eels disappeared. This book contains more accounts like this, all baffling. I have my own wild theories about eels, but I encourage you to read this book and come up with your own. So next up I have Entangled Life by Merlin Sheldrake. Fungus is all around us, more so than you might realize. In many different forms, fungi connects to trees and plants and even insects and animals. Known as mycologists, scientists who study fungi have found incredible things that demonstrate how intelligent fungi are. They communicate, they establish trade networks with other plants, they farm, and they are ravenous explorers. They can also be quite delicious, as I'm sure many of us are aware. The author describes truffle hunters in Italy who train dogs to track the powerful scent of fungi buried in the earth, and also talks about the staggering prices that these fungi go for. It's truly baffling how much some of these fungi are. There was so much fascinating information about fungi in this book, and it provided insight into how the world works. Also, the word fungi is just really fun to say. So this was definitely, it was a really fun read. Sorry. All right, next up is Antigone Rising by Helen Morales. This is a really interesting examination of how Greek and Roman myths relate to modern feminism. The book shows how misogyny is ancient and examines parallels between the myths and stories of classical antiquity and modern day oppression and violence against women, women of color, and queer folk. The author also argues that these myths belong to all of us and that no one culture can claim ownership. There has absolutely been arguments and debates in the past about various representations of these myths. Some people get very upset when they see new interpretations using people of color in the place of some of these characters from mythology, but the author shows that that doesn't matter. The stories belong to everybody. It's part of why mythology is so wonderful. So the ideas contained in the myths still aren't very kind to women and other marginalized groups. But if you have enjoyed Greek and Roman mythology and are interested in hearing some of those stories in a new way, I definitely recommend this book. Next up is Broken by Jenny Lawson. Anytime I recommend a Jenny Lawson book to someone, I have to tell them not to judge the book by the cover, because all of her covers are very unique and interesting, but all very fun nonetheless. So you may have seen this book on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list a few weeks ago, where it debuted at number 3. And while it may have been the first time that that has happened for her, this is not Jenny Lawson's first rodeo, as I alluded to. In her first 2 books, she talked about her childhood living in rural Texas, getting karate kicked in the face by her future husband, the struggles she went through when having her daughter, the truly hilarious and baffling things that happened to her throughout her life, and of course, her struggles with anxiety, depression, and autoimmune disorders. In her newest book, Broken, in the best possible way, Lawson talks about her ongoing fight against mental illness, whether she's hiding in a blanket fort or out buying weird taxidermy on her good days. There are so many wonderful, sad, and hilarious stories in this book that it's impossible to count, but at the same time, it's full of love and joy and hope and just really makes you feel good in a way. And if you ever have struggles that you think no one else can understand, Jenny Lawson does a really good job of letting you know that you're not alone. So I very much recommend this one. And next up, I have Unwell Women by Eleanor Cleghorn, which is coming out in June. So this book looks at the ways that medicine has failed women, women of color and white women. Since the dawn of ancient medical practice, which I'm talking about Hippocrates, women's bodies have been misunderstood, sometimes seemingly willfully so. You might be familiar with the word hysteria, but did you know that it was used as a diagnosis for women with wildly different symptoms? Whether a woman had a headache, a sore back, a fever, or even depression, a doctor could diagnose her with hysteria, essentially blaming her illness on her uterus. Misdiagnoses and misunderstandings like this are not new, but they are also not completely gone. Cleghorn goes throughout history and examines the many, many instances of women being let down by medicine. The author herself experienced the life of an unwell woman when she got sick 10 years ago. This book contains horrifying stories that shocked me to my core because it is so hard to learn what has happened to other women, and in some cases continues to happen. But it's also really important to know our history. So I highly recommend this book. It might be difficult sometimes, but it is very, very enlightening. That is all I have for you. I hope you found something you liked. And next up is Harry.
Thanks, Lauren. Oh, I like those picks. My first book is Soul City by Thomas Healy. If you remember, in the 2016 tax law, there were economic opportunity zones created. Did you know that in the 1970s, however, there was a Black utopian community in rural North Carolina that was funded by the federal government on the grounds of a former slave plantation, and it was supposed to attract American business. It was created by Floyd McKissick, a civil rights activist who lobbied and got federal funding for a place called Soul City. However, in North Carolina, they had a senatorial election shortly after Soul City started, and Jesse Helms, the conservative Republican senator, came to power and got the federal funding stopped. After that, the Raleigh newspaper ran a series of articles saying that there was fraud and corruption in Soul City. What was the truth? A law professor who grew up in North Carolina parses through all the evidence and comes to some surprising conclusions in this book. What really piqued my interest, not only did this book get starred reviews when it came out, but also someone who grew up in Soul City posted a review on Amazon saying the book was completely accurate. So I would highly recommend it. It's a very interesting book. My next book is The Third Rainbow Girl. You liked the book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark. This is similar. It's part memoir, part true crime book about two adult middle-class women who hitchhiked to a music festival in West Virginia. They were murdered in 1980. What happened with their investigation into their deaths? What caused their deaths? And who is the third Rainbow Girl? Because two women were murdered, but there was a third one that was with them. You will go behind the scenes into the police investigation, into the conviction of one man, and then he's sent to prison and someone else is found to be the murderer. So this was a very interesting book about race, class issues in Appalachia and how they caused this miscarriage of justice, and also why did these women disappear and were found murdered. My third book is The Spy Master of Baghdad. You like Daniel Silva. You like John le Carré, who has a new book coming out from, I guess, Beyond the Grave, because he's dead, but they found a manuscript. This is a true story about two conflicting narratives in Iraq. You have an underground, I should say an undercover unit of the Iraqi military called the Falcons. The Falcons infiltrate ISIS. They have undercover operations, and at great danger to themselves, they engage with ISIS. At the same time, a woman whose family was prominent in Saddam Hussein's Iraq and loses everything when Saddam is overthrown is a brilliant science student. She decides that she wants to get revenge on the people who have invaded Iraq and on the people who are running the new government. She decides she's going to hook up with ISIS. She travels from Iraq to Syria and meets up with ISIS leadership, the people that are responsible for ISIS's chemical weapons program. Do they accept this woman, Abrar? The answer is no, they don't. So she goes back to Iraq. She's very upset, and she decides, I'm going to create my own weapons of mass destruction. So you can imagine the Falcons, these two brothers who are part of the Falcons unit, and Abrar are on a collision course where families on both sides are going to face enormous sacrifices. I highly recommend this book, which is written by the former Baghdad bureau chief of the New York Times. My next book is The Problem of Alzheimer's, which is written by the head of the memory unit at the University of Pennsylvania hospitals. I did not know that Alzheimer's was really sort of a backwater diagnosis. They would say, oh, Uncle Joe is senile. Due to social pressures, as well as a lot of money being thrown at the problem and politics being involved, Alzheimer's went from a nothing diagnosis to being at the forefront of medical research. And what Dr. Karlowitz shows is what research is being done on Alzheimer's. What effect does it have on its caregivers? How can it be managed? It's a fascinating book. And as the cover points out, it was a rare disease and now it's a crisis. Really enjoyed this book. It was interesting. I learned a lot from it. My next book is Halfway Home. This one I'm going to match up with The Second Chance Club, which is another nonfiction book. That book is written by a former New Orleans parole officer and talks about life after prison. This is written by a University of Chicago sociologist whose father was in prison, whose mother abandoned him. His grandmother raised him in a rough neighborhood in Chicago. He had violence every day to deal with, and the police were nowhere to be found. It took him 15 years to write this book. His brother was in prison. He was a prison chaplain at the Cook County Jail, and now he's a professor at the University of Chicago. So it's part memoir and part sociology study. It talks about the fact that mass incarceration has created another level of prison, which is post-imprisonment. So I really enjoyed this book. It was eye-opening. My next book, which is coming out, is called Dirty Work. Now, if you remember when COVID started, President Trump declared certain classes of workers to be, quote, essential workers. And included in those were slaughterhouse employees, correctional guards, drone operators, and oil rig operators. All of these people are featured in this book, Dirty Work, which just got a starred review in Publishers Weekly. Press interviews these workers and shows that they deal with shame, stigma, and PTSD. And unfortunately, the nature of our business here, and maybe we would pair this with a new book about Amazon, is to have essential work done cheaply and behind the scenes. So this book I'm looking forward to reading, and I will turn it over to Sarah so we can see what questions you have for us.
Thanks, Harry. Yeah, those were some really awesome picks. So yeah, I have just opened the chat. If you do have questions, if you could please type them into the chat box, and we will have a bit of Q&A at the end. Instead of raising your hand, type your question into the chat box. But before we have our Q&A, I just want to draw your attention to a few services and upcoming programs that we have. So if tonight's presentation didn't give you enough ideas for reading, I invite you to try out our personalized reading service. This is a form that's on our website that you can fill out and tell us what you like and don't like, and you'll receive a list of 5 titles created just for you. You'll find it on our website under the Books, e-Media, and More tab. And then we do have some virtual programs coming up. So if you enjoyed this presentation, we would love to see you at a few of our other virtual programs. Since you all like nonfiction, you might like to know that we have a nonfiction book discussion group. It is virtual. It meets on Zoom the first Wednesday of the month, and the next meeting is coming up on Wednesday, June 2nd at 7 p.m. They'll be discussing The Good Neighbor by Maxwell King, which is the biography of Mr. Rogers. I've read this book. It's really good. Even if you haven't read the book, you're welcome to join the discussion just to see what it's like, or of course to come to the July discussion, which, as I said, is always on the first Wednesday of the month. And I will put the sign up link for this in the follow-up email to tonight's program. We also have another book talk type program like this one coming up in June. We have Pride Month book picks. It will be coming up on Monday, June 21st at 7 p.m. And we'll talk all about like LGBTQ literature from like every genre. So keep an eye out for that, and please sign up on our events calendar. And at this point, I think we will go ahead and open it up into to some questions. Let's see here. If our presenters would like to unmute and turn on their cameras, and I think I will. This is our email address up here on the screen if you would like to email us, but I think I'll stop sharing the screen just so we can see all of our faces. Let's see, someone was asking if any of these books are available in large print, and that is not something that I looked up for my titles. But my guess from mine is that Underland might be available in large print. I'll have to take a look. And I definitely think that my forthcoming pick, The Women They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore, is going to come out in large print. She's like a really big nonfiction name. And so Radium Girls came out in large print. So I'm almost positive that one will as well. Do any of you all know if any of yours come in large print?
I'm looking mine up now.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure, but I will look them up and email that to you.
Okay, good. I will be sending a follow-up email to everyone that attended tonight that has like the links to the events we talked about. I'll have the handouts in there again. And we are recording tonight's presentation, so I'll have a link to the recording for that too. That follow-up email will go out in a couple of days after the recording's ready. So maybe I can report back on large print then. And just putting it out there, that if you read books in ebook format, you can make any book that's available in ebook into large print by changing the print size. So yeah, try out that option too if you haven't already. Do we have any other questions? If you have a question, please type your question into the chat box instead of raising your hand. The raising hand doesn't work for us. So if you could type your question into the chat box.
While we wait, Harry, did you have any weird theories about eels? Because I certainly did. I became convinced that they somehow travel to a parallel dimension, that there is a rift to somewhere in the ocean, because I have no idea where else those eels would go or come from. So that's my working theory.
Lauren and I both read the Book of Eels, and we were talking before we started about how much we love the book. Yes, I was at a city in northern Greece that had a lake that was filled with eels, and eels were the local delicacy. And I have nothing against eating cooked eels, but I learned so much from reading that book.
Much. It was really good. and made me want to eat eel, which is not great, but.
Okay, we have one more question. Oh, I should actually say, Lauren, your theory is very interesting because Lauren, in addition to liking science books, actually likes science fiction books too. So I like that they're sort of converging there in your theory about eels. Okay, in the chat, we do have a question about making our way home and how it compares to the warmth of other suns. So yeah, do you want to answer that?
Oh, wait, I'm seeing lots of, I keep seeing my name popping up in the chat. Okay.
Yeah, making our way home is was one of your picks, Bernice, right?
Yes, making our way home was one of my picks.
Have you read The Warmth of Other Suns?
I have not. That's what I was gonna say. That I don't know how it compares to that because I did not read that.
It's a good one. The Warmth of Other Suns is also about the Great Migration, but I haven't read Making Our Way Home, so I can't. Yeah,
We're kind of on opposite ends.
I know. But Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote The Warmth of Other Suns, has a new book out called Cast, and that book's really good too. So do check that one. Check that one out. Oh, could you repeat the title of the other book by I'm Judging You by
Yes.
Lovey? What's the name?
Yes, The Professional Troublemaker, The Fear Fighter Manual. And also, that might be a great program idea. 2 books versus one another.
Bernice, did you read Wandering in Strange Lands by Morgan Jerkins?
I did not, but you're giving me.
That is it's the daughter of the Great Migration who goes back and retraces the steps that her ancestors took.
I like this. Okay.
It's really good.
Please email. I don't have a pen with me, but please email that to me.
I will email it to you.
Thank you, Harry.
Let's see. We have a couple comments. Someone saying that we have opened their mind about nonfiction books, and someone else who also said that they don't always choose nonfiction, but they welcome those ideas. Yeah, so we're really glad to have that feedback. We were talking before we started about nonfiction, and I was saying, like, I love nonfiction now as an adult, but as a kid, like, nonfiction was not very good when I was a kid. So I had this, like, and I think a lot of people have these ideas that nonfiction is boring, but there's so much good nonfiction these days. Yeah, so I'm glad you all are getting good ideas. Yeah, Lauren.
So I see the question about the memoirs and appropriateness for young adults. Depending on your take on language, Jenny Lawson's memoirs would be appropriate for young adults, just as long as they're okay with some swearing. But otherwise, aside from the language, everything is totally cool for young adults.
Both of my memoirs cover the author's young adulthood, so I think there are things that young adults would really relate to. However, there is like some edgy content in both of them, and so I don't know, like, you as a parent would kind of want to pre-screen to see, and I definitely would say it would probably be for like older teens for sure. And yeah, there's like language. In fact, if I remember right, Saigon like opens with like the F word. So there's definitely language in there, but I mean, just putting it out there, like, most teens have probably heard those words. So, but yeah, especially Saigon is about his teenagerhood. So that might be something that the right kind of teen would be into. All right. Do we have any other questions? Well, before we go, Lauren and Bernice, do you have any programs coming up that you want to talk about before we head out?
I do not have any programs. I am looking forward to when in programming things happen, or in-person programming starts again. I really miss being with teens. Oh.
Like Sarah said, I do like science fiction, and I do run a science fiction fantasy book club, currently virtual. We are meeting next month, so you can look it up on the website. We are reading All Systems Read by Martha Wells. So you're always welcome. Always good.
That's a funny one.
It's,
Yeah.
I love it so much.
Oh, someone asked if we have anything planned for historical fiction. We don't have anything specifically historical fiction coming up, but most of our like general book talks do have some historical fiction picks. I'm not sure, there might be a couple in the Pride one. There definitely, we're planning something for Missouri's bicentennial that has to do with Mark Twain in August, and I bet there'll be a couple of historical fiction involved in that one. But it's a good suggestion, and we might keep that in mind. We like doing these sort of genre-based ones. All right. Well, I think that might be that. If we don't have any other questions, then we thank you all. Thank you to Lauren and Bernice, especially for joining us from the branches. We know you're back to I think you're both at the library right now, right? You're presenting from the library, so you're probably gonna log off and like go right back out to like being at the desk. So we really appreciate you joining us tonight from Daniel Boone and Indian Trails. And yeah, thanks to Harry. I mean, I see you all the time, so because we work together. But yeah, and thank all of you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate sharing books with you and talking, especially about nonfiction, which I think is kind of niche and has a lot of, I don't know, like myths about it. So we're excited to share our titles with you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I hope you have a lovely evening, and we'll see you again next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you.